to talk about stilts. So at each studio we have the stilts that live somewhere in the firing area, and the reason why you would use a stilt is because your pot is glazed all the way around, and so you don't want it to fuse to the shelf. So this is a great example of a piece that is clear glazed all the way around. So if we put it directly on the shelf, it would just fuse and ruin the shelf and your piece. So we would use a stilt for this. Choosing your stilt is kind of an art. You don't want it to be too big or too small or too wobbly. So I might try this one and see if that is a good fit. I feel pretty good about that because it's not wobbly. If I'm loading the kiln, I would put that on the shelf and then set that right on top. And basically those spiky points are touching the pot. And so it actually is gonna fuse a tiny bit, but it should just pop off once you're done firing it. One common mistake that we see is that people will put the stilt upside down and then set that on there. That is just gonna act like a kiln shelf, so it's just gonna fuse directly to that, ruining the stilt and your piece. So make sure that the spiky points are facing up and connecting to your pot. Another thing is, like, we wouldn't want to use a super large stilt for this piece. You don't want to put it on there because it will just fall off. You don't want to put it in the middle because there's no spiky points. Oftentimes some people will put stilts on a pot that's unglazed. That's also totally unnecessary. So if it's unglazed on the bottom, you can just set it on the shelf. If you're worried about it running, that's when we would use a cookie, which you can watch our cookies video if you're curious about that. And then another common thing that we see is sometimes people will use a stilt and a cookie, like that. And the only time in which that is necessary is if this glaze is known to be like a really runny glaze. So this clear glaze we know is stable. All of our studio glazes are quite stable, so you wouldn't actually need to put a cookie underneath. And it doesn't really make loading much easier, so just the stilt is totally fine. And then however you load things onto the shelf is how the staff is going to load them into the kiln. So for example, I would put the stilt down and put my piece on there, and then this is how it should be loaded into the kiln. If there was an upside down stilt or something that didn't look right, the work trade team or staff, they might just fix it, or they might put it in the almost there area. So if you're not seeing your piece come through, you can always check this area. And I think that's everything.
Want to do a smaller stilt with the bowl?
What was that?
A small stilt under the big
small
bowl.
stilt with the bowl?
Yes.
Yeah. So sometimes people use stilts that are too small. Oh, I need to go over that too. And that is just a little bit like wobbly and unruly. So this, you can see, just kind of falls to the side, so it's not very effective. And then lastly, we have this little stilt field. Trying to think of what this would be good for. Kind of wider, or like, odd shaped pieces. But you can kind of set the field as you like it and as works for your piece. So you can set the stilts, and then let's say this were glazed all the way around, I could put the cute little cow perfectly atop my set stilts. That's not the best example because that one's not sitting right there. And I think that's everything.
Thanks.
Thank you.